Welcome back. Cash Cycle 3, the real Bitcoin. Joining me today are returning guests from Cash Cycle 1, the Bitcoin special, almost 2 years ago to the day, Ross Gerber, now a top 100 blockchain influencer, and Roger Ver, aka Bitcoin Jesus. Guys, thanks so much for coming back to join us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice reunion.
Yeah.
So, where we were to where we are today, we were at $320 a coin in 2015. We're now touching 8,000 as of today. What are your guys' thoughts?
Plus another 1,000 for the Bitcoin Cash that split off of it there. So we're almost to 10,000 at this point.
That's true. The total market capitalization would include the 4 coins. Tell us a little bit what you think about that.
So can I get into my first question? And before I get into my first question, you know, I'm a licensed RIA. I'm SEC registered. So this discussion is only my opinions. I do not recommend to any client or to anybody that they buy or sell any cryptocurrency. Whatever people do is in their own fruition. I'm simply here to help educate and discuss the issues around Bitcoin. So compliance people who are watching this, don't worry, I'm not recommending Bitcoin to anybody. The purpose of this show is to educate people about cryptocurrencies so they can make smarter decisions for their finances.
But I will gladly recommend to people that they buy Bitcoin Cash and sell their Bitcoin Core, because that's the smart thing to do at this point.
So why do you say that? So how come on my Coinbase account, I didn't get any Bitcoin Cash from this fork?
Because you made the mistake of using a Bitcoin bank. Coinbase is a fantastic company that makes it super easy to buy Bitcoin and sell Bitcoin, and soon to buy and sell Bitcoin Cash. But it's not a Bitcoin wallet, it's a Bitcoin bank. They're holding the Bitcoins on your behalf. And At any time, your great, wonderful friends at the SEC could go over to Coinbase and say, give us Ross's Bitcoins, and Coinbase will have to do that. Same goes for the IRS or FBI or anybody else for that matter. Whereas if you use a Bitcoin wallet, like the fantastic ones listed available for download over on Bitcoin.com, you actually have the Bitcoins yourself. And if Bitcoin were to ever fork again into another version of Bitcoin, you would have access to those coins from day one. So it's very, very important for people to understand that they should hold their Bitcoins.
Was that an arbitrary decision by Coinbase? Did they just keep my Bitcoin Cash is basically what you're saying?
They've said that they're going to eventually give you access to your Bitcoin Cash when they get around to it. And here we are several months later, and they haven't quite gotten around to it yet.
Great.
So I've heard tentative timelines of January for that release of Bitcoin Cash from Coinbase. I was thinking like January might be the timetable for it.
And that's maybe what they said, but at the same time, everybody would rather have their money sooner rather than later. So,
for sure. But this is like one of the issues I have with Bitcoin. Like here, Coinbase, the most reputable company that has a Bitcoin company that trades here in America, basically arbitrarily decides what they're doing with our money without any real conversation or policy for dealing with it. And that makes me very concerned. Like we got an email last night, they basically shut down Coinbase for 24 hours for this new fork. And it's very disheartening to think that these people are holding probably hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more.
All the more reason to use a Bitcoin wallet. It's very, very important to distinguish between Bitcoin wallets and Bitcoin banks.
So
and
maybe
Coinbase
you can educate people on what choices they have in Bitcoin wallets, and then how do you trade Bitcoin from a wallet?
So to trade Bitcoin from a wallet, you'd have to go and send your Bitcoin to an exchange, and the exchange holds them as you're trading and you're putting your orders in on the order book. And exchanges are great for that, but don't use them as Bitcoin wallets. Don't use Coinbase, don't use Kraken, don't use Bitfinex, don't use any of these companies as Bitcoin wallets. Use them as exchanges, or understand that you're using them as a bank and you're at their mercy just like you are with a traditional bank. Whereas with a Bitcoin wallet like blockchain.info or Bread Wallet or the Bitcoin.com wallet, you will have 100% complete control over your funds, and there's not anything anyone in the world can do to stop you from sending and receiving that money. And if the chain splits, you still have both versions of those coins from day one. So it's very, very important that people understand, hold your Bitcoins yourself.
So what you're saying is there's a big distinction between where you hold your Bitcoin and where you trade your Bitcoin, and that the same company really can't do both.
Well, you shouldn't let anybody else hold your Bitcoin for you, or you should understand. So like with your money, the difference between Coinbase and say the Bitcoin.com wallet, for example, would be if you have your money in Bank of America, or you have your money in your wallet in your pocket. And obviously your money in your wallet in your pocket, you have much more control over what goes on with that than you do with Bank of America. And so Coinbase is the equivalent of Bank of America, and Bitcoin.com's wallet is the equivalent of the wallet in your pocket with pieces of paper in your wallet.
So Roger, you're saying soon to be on Coinbase. I'm guessing you know something we don't about Bitcoin Cash.
Well, I think they announced it publicly, right?
Oh, did they? Okay. Is it fair to say that one of the motivations for Bitcoin Cash is the encroaching regulatory umbrella that's coming into Bitcoin via the CME, via the SEC, that it's taking away from what the original motives for Bitcoin really was, to create a coin that was devoid of governance, that is now, slowly creeping underneath the umbrella of, the watchful eye?
I think that's just an added benefit. The main benefit is that Bitcoin Cash is the most similar to the Bitcoin that we talked about, in 2015, and the Bitcoin that I got involved in 2011. It has basically zero fees, and you can send and receive the money anywhere in the world instantly, just like that, and nobody can stop it. Bitcoin Core at this point, it costs $20 a transaction. You have no idea when your transaction is going to go through or if it's going to go through at all. So if you look at the two versions of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash is the one that went from Bitcoin being nothing into this worldwide phenomenon that it is today. And Bitcoin Core has become something else that I guess some people are speculating on at the moment. But in the long run, the real utility is with Bitcoin Cash. And that's why I've been selling a large percentage of my Bitcoin Core coins for more Bitcoin Cash coins. And when we see the likes of Coinbase and blockchain.info and Bitcoin.com, of course, integrating Bitcoin Cash and primarily relying on Bitcoin Cash, I think we're going to see Bitcoin Cash surpass Bitcoin Core in price and in hash rate and in overall adoption around the world. I think we're going to see a flip.
Big thing you're saying here, because this was a lot of my issues with the original Bitcoin that we talked about 2 years ago, which essentially has now happened, where all these institutions have figured out how to make millions of dollars in fees off of. Basically, Bitcoin was meant to be sort of an open source, free way for this decentralized money to move around. And now you got these big institutions charging $20 a transaction. It kind of kills.
So
Bitcoin,
I'd like to stop you right there if I can, Ross. So the $20 a transaction has become an official policy from a bunch of programmers that don't have any economics or background or business background whatsoever. And they openly say that Bitcoin having high fees is a good thing. They openly say that Bitcoin having full blocks is a good thing. They openly say that these are good things, and full blocks cause unreliable transactions and high fees. So they say that these are good things. And for anybody with any common sense, that you want your money to be, fast, cheap, and reliable. But these people are openly saying that they want Bitcoin to be slow, expensive, and unreliable.
Doesn't this dilute the brand of Bitcoin? Because most people are just learning what Bitcoin is, and Bitcoin relies on more users adopting it for the value to go up. And by confusing the brand of Bitcoin to the public that basically doesn't understand it now, don't you think that puts the whole concept at risk?
I think it's been incredibly damaging to Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin would already have been tens of thousands of dollars each by now if these people hadn't intentionally made Bitcoin be slow, expensive, and unreliable. And so, yeah, you're right. It does damage the brand or reputation if the entire ecosystem flips over to Bitcoin Cash. But the alternative is having something that doesn't work at all. And that's why we've seen Bitcoin's market share go from almost 100% down to around 50% at this point. That's a direct result of Bitcoin intentionally, by Blockstream and Bitcoin Core developers, intentionally being made to have high fees, be slow and unreliable. And guess what? When things are expensive, slow, and unreliable, people are going to look for alternatives.
The trouble I have with all this is that essentially the same people that created this thing with all these wonderful benefits are now doing the exact opposite of what they should be.
So that's not true either. So a bunch of people that came into Bitcoin later basically kicked out the people that were going along the same roadmap that Bitcoin had in the earliest days. So Satoshi Nakamoto turned over the keys to the entire GitHub repository for Bitcoin to a guy named Gavin Andreessen, who had done a wonderful job, had a Princeton degree, fantastically level-headed, great guy. And he was nice enough to share keys to access this with other people. And then they revoked his access and booted him out of the project. And another guy, Jeff Garzik, who's a Linux core contributor, an amazing coder, they gave him the boot there as well. So
basically what you're saying is people were ejected by profit seekers in the Bitcoin world. And now, so how is Bitcoin Cash different than Bitcoin? Is there a finite amount of Bitcoin Cash, or does it work more like Ethereum?
Bitcoin Cash is the true version of Bitcoin in my book at this point. So on August 1st, they split into two different versions. There's Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash, the roadmap is to just allow the blocks to get as big as they need to be as more people use it, which means the transactions will always continue to be very, very cheap, very fast, and very reliable. Whereas Bitcoin Core, they've intentionally capped the block size at 1 megabyte, which means only about 2,000 people can use Bitcoin Core every 10 minutes, and they all have to bid against each other to do that. So that's why they're bidding $20 at the moment, but more and more businesses and people like myself are switching over to Bitcoin Cash because the fees are less than a penny and the transactions go through right away.
So one thing about that though, so you've got technically the better utility as far as payments go with Bitcoin Cash, and keeping the thing that's most similar to Bitcoin. Is it more about rebranding Bitcoin as Bitcoin Cash? Because, you know, if you look at things like coins like Litecoin or many other coins that have, better technologies out there in the altcoin world, was the real move for Bitcoin Cash just to keep it on the same hash, on the same algorithm, and take the brand away from Bitcoin Core and make Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin? Was that like a driving motivation?
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play, and that's certainly one of them. I think Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Core has become something else that was what Bitcoin was never originally intended to be. And they've managed to do this through a giant censorship campaign. Ross may be surprised to hear that the most popular Bitcoin discussion platform on the entire internet is our Bitcoin on Reddit. And these people managed to get a hold of that platform where there's tens or hundreds of thousands of viewers a day, and they will literally delete anybody's post that's in opposition to the roadmap of intentionally making Bitcoin have high fees and unreliable transactions. They will literally delete your post if you do that. But the other thing here that I think should be very, very worrying for any Bitcoin Core holder is there is a significant chance that Bitcoin Cash will become so popular that it'll siphon away all the hash rate from Bitcoin Core, and the Bitcoin Core chain will either have to change their proof of work or die off completely. And I think there's a really good chance that Bitcoin Cash will become the default Bitcoin. And the reason it's become more popular than things like, Litecoin or Dash or any of these other coins is because Bitcoin Cash has the second biggest user base in the entire world. Every single person in the world that was a Bitcoin holder on August 1st of this year is also a Bitcoin Cash holder. So that gives Bitcoin Cash the second biggest network effect in the entire world. And I think and if you look at it over today, Bitcoin Cash is up significantly more than Bitcoin was. In the last week, Bitcoin Cash is up significantly more. And in the last month, Bitcoin Cash is up significantly more than Bitcoin Core. And everybody's excited about the Bitcoin Core price. But if you look at it, the Bitcoin Cash price is really outpacing it in terms of percentage. And that won't have to go on very much longer.
Coinbase.
What was that, Ross?
That doesn't trade on Coinbase.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But
that's what
give it a few more days here.
So another question.
This whole thing will now have Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Litecoin.
So Ross, as a businessman, I'd love to ask you if you have two versions of Bitcoin, one that's super expensive, super slow, and super unreliable, and one that's fast, cheap, and reliable, which one of those two are you more inclined to use?
Well, that's a loaded question because one of them everybody talks about and the other one nobody has any idea what it is. So there is value to the term Bitcoin. And I think that education process, which is part of the purpose of the show, like I've already learned something about this that I didn't know, is a really important thing. And that's why I was saying one of the risks that is going on here is diluting the brand and confusing the consumers, because these people you need for Bitcoin to work. And if they don't know which Bitcoin to buy now, that might hurt the ability for Bitcoin to continue to scale. But I think there's a lot of people, and these are probably the people you're talking about, who strategically are trying to make Bitcoin like gold, where it's a storehouse of value and, we're going to control it and charge fees on it. And it seems like the developers like yourself are saying, this is ridiculous. We're going to do our own Bitcoin that's really about what it should have been about, which is transactions and building a financial system around it. But this causes a lot of potential issues and risks. Like if Bitcoin Core fails, that can't help Bitcoin.
Yeah, the Bitcoin Core developers, by intentionally making Bitcoin slow and expensive and unreliable, have really done a disservice to the adoption of Bitcoin worldwide. And they always love to point and say, look, we're at all-time new highs. We have to stop and think about where would we be today if we hadn't had these crazy high fees and unreliable transactions. We'd have even more adoption. And because the supply is limited, with increased adoption comes increased price. So the price would almost certainly be much higher today, if not for their
This
policies.
is a huge risk and problem with decentralization then. And this was one of my original concepts, is you have the advantage of decentralization is there's no government that controls it, but you now have the disadvantage of everybody fighting with each other.
Well,
yeah, I'm a bit tired of the fighting.
Let me ask you something. I mean, the hash rate, being split between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core, isn't that jeopardizing the security of both chains?
Yeah.
Can you also define hash rate for people so they understand what that is?
I guess I'll take that. So hash rate is the amount of computing power that's securing the Bitcoin network. So the more hash rate is that's on a particular network, the more secure that network is. And so Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core are fighting over hash rate, and the miners just switch to whichever coin is the most profitable. But we've already seen the #1 and #2 mining pools in the entire world say that they're going to mine whichever coin is most profitable, but they're going to sell those coins right away for Bitcoin Cash, because Bitcoin Cash is the one that's the most useful in commerce. And even myself on Bitcoin.com, we're moving all of our infrastructure over to Bitcoin Cash. My personal holdings, I'm moving over to Bitcoin Cash. It's very, very, very clear to me that Bitcoin Cash is going to be the one that winds up being the most useful in commerce. And if it's the one that's the most useful in commerce, it's also going to be the one that's the most useful as a store of value. So it'll win on both those fronts.
Worry about having data centers, though, once you get larger, will actually centralize your coin, though, and kind of take away from the decentralized aspect, utility of Bitcoin?
No, I think the goal is censorship resistance, not necessarily decentralization. You only need enough decentralization to have that censorship resistance. And if we scale Bitcoin to where billions of people around the world are using it, that means we're going to have hundreds of thousands of businesses around the world using it. So we'll have, at least tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of nodes around the world. I think that's plenty.
Funny you just brought that up, because Square, this week, either to pump their stock or to legitimately look at Bitcoin, announced that they're looking at putting Bitcoin, trading onto their Square Cash app. The stocks rallied big time on it. I don't know if that means anything, because they were only talking about testing it. But obviously Square accepts payments from, tens of thousands of people around the country. And one of the things we're looking at as a firm is a company like PayPal starting to trade or accept Bitcoin for transactions. But if what you're saying is true, on a mass scale volume level, Bitcoin isn't really what I want to do transactions with. And that
Bitcoin Cash is what you want to do, because they're going to be less than a penny and go through right away. Whereas Bitcoin Core transactions will cost you $20, $30, $50. Just yesterday, I sent a bunch of my Bitcoin to a Bitcoin exchange to buy more Bitcoin Cash, and to send the Bitcoin Core coins from my wallet, where we received a bunch of payments for our cloud mining contracts. I sent $20,000 worth of Bitcoin Core. The fee was over $1,000 to send $20,000, right? And if I had done that with Bitcoin Cash, it would have been about a penny. And when we send out the daily mining pool payouts for our Bitcoin.com mining pool, the Bitcoin Cash payouts have been averaging about $500 a day in fees, and the Bitcoin Cash payments are about 40 cents in fees.
Well, maybe that's the conspiracy, Roger, is that all these people can now make as much money in fees off of Bitcoin now that it's become big enough that they're just trying to profit off these fees. Just like
the fees, the fees are going to the miners, and most of the miners are upset with this as well, to be honest. So because they get the fees, but they also get the base reward. And if the base reward of the blocks goes up, if Bitcoin goes to $100,000 of Bitcoin, that's worth a heck of a lot more than the pittance amount of fees that they're getting on each
now,
block.
how does the inflation of Bitcoin Cash work? Because does it work the same where there's 21 million Bitcoin Cash coins?
It's exactly identical to Bitcoin, with one small exception, is that the difficulty can adjust a little bit faster than the Bitcoin Core difficulty adjusts. So right now,
and this has to do with the size of the block.
It's a little more complicated than that, but the amount of coins in circulation are almost identical between the two. It's less than 1% difference.
Now, did the fork that you guys did on Bitcoin Cash on Monday solve that the gaming of the emergency difficulty algo that was being manipulated by the miners? Did you guys solve that problem?
So far, it's been much, much, much smoother. And there's a fantastic website at fork.lol where people can see the hash rate of both chains, and it's been very smooth since that fork. And it's a pretty good example of just how safe hard forks can be. Whereas the Bitcoin Core side of things have been claimed that you can't ever hard fork without months and months or years and years of preparation in advance. Whereas this fork, they cranked out in about a month or so.
Do you worry about this fork being like setting a precedence to turn forking Bitcoin into the new kind of ICO, where the best way now to create a coin is just to split Bitcoin if you can get a consensus with miners and keep doing this over and over and over, which would ultimately harm the brand?
For sure.
It's only happened once with Bitcoin, and it's happened once with Ethereum. And both times the combined market cap was more than the original market cap before the split. So from a financial perspective, it seems to be a good deal for everybody involved. And especially in Bitcoin now, everybody gets to use the version of Bitcoin that they think is the most useful. So the Bitcoin Core supporters can use their Bitcoin Core coin. People like me that actually use Bitcoin in commerce to pay people around the world and receive payments around the world, we're moving to Bitcoin Cash as fast as we possibly can.
Yeah, I don't know if that's good for pricing, though, because remember, if you're focused on transactions, that means that pricing 10% movements of the price on a daily basis don't really work well with transactions. So by diluting the brand with more and more forks, essentially you're going to have less volatility and less, concentration of trading, and probably less usage of Bitcoin overall over time as people get confused and they don't know what to do. And I don't know if that's the best strategy for Bitcoin if it really wants to be the global dominant decentralized currency, because what you're really saying is what we're going to get in the future is basically a crypto market of who knows how many different coins, and that isn't going to work.
And that's why I'm, I guess, so frustrated with the Blockstream and core developers here. We had the formula, we had the empirical evidence and the track record of 8 or 9 years there of it working amazingly well to grow Bitcoin into this worldwide phenomenon with nearly 100% market share in the crypto coin space. And it wasn't until they changed that formula by making the blocks full that Bitcoin lost its near 100% market share. Now it's around 50% market share, and there's all these competing altcoins around the world. And it's a direct result of them changing the magic formula that worked incredibly well. And we had this empirical evidence and track record showing that it worked well. If something's working well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And unfortunately, these guys took something that was working amazingly well and broke it at this point. And that's shown in the fact that—
if I'm getting your vibe right here, this isn't about, oh yeah, rah, rah, Bitcoin. This is about Bitcoin is actually searching for its true identity right now. And while the public is just waking up and saying, I want to buy Bitcoin now, and we get a call every day about it, and they're coming in and buying this is actually a horrible time to do that, because it's, looking for its identity in the future doesn't seem like it's going to be with regular Bitcoin.
Well, if you're the first fool in and the first fool out, you'll do just fine. But if you're the last fool in and then the last fool out, you're going to lose all your money there.
Well, that's why I like you guys, because you guys got the first fool in, and now I guess I'm the first fool out.
And so I don't know if I was the first fool in, but I was definitely one of the first people in.
You guys talked me into it. I think what we did 2 years ago in hindsight was incredibly interesting, especially if you watch it today, because so much in the world has changed. And I credit a lot of Bitcoin's success to Donald Trump and the instability that has awash over the world, which I literally could have never predicted 2 years ago. But it literally is the ideal scenario we discussed for Bitcoin. And sure enough, it's happening. Like, we literally could have another financial crisis again in the next 5 years. And, so all this is this huge opportunity, but yet it seems like greed and forks and developers who can't get along are just destroying the soul of what was kind of a beautiful thing.
I think it's not so much greed. I think it's just ignorance more than anything else. And I've had a lot of debates.
Roger, it's greed. That's why they're charging these fees. Somebody's making the money.
So I don't think that that's intentionally what's going on.
You're an idealist, and I respect that, but I'm a capitalist, and people don't do what you're saying they're doing just because. They're doing it because they figured out they can make a lot of money. Charging you $1,000 to move $20,000, that's worse than Visa.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Worse than banks, and makes me glad I sold those Bitcoin core coins for Bitcoin Cash coins.
I mean, I think we can wire for $25, $100 grand right now.
Sure can.
From my firm. So maybe dollars aren't so bad now.
I agree with
Bitcoin Cash is a penny.
Right. But see, the problem is nobody knows it yet. They have to be educated, and that's what you have to do, is educate people. That's the good thing about this show, that this is what's happening in Bitcoin, and this is what people need to do and need to look at.
So you heard it here first, folks. Ross says go out and get some Bitcoin Cash.
No, I didn't say that at all. I'm not saying to do anything.
Regulators.
Whatever you infer out of this is your choice.
So, Roger, what do you think, in the crypto world, I've been out there for quite a few years. There's a lot of, you're a pretty polarizing guy, and there's a lot of vitriol being slung your way. And no one seems to share, in the crypto markets that I'm in, seems to share that viewpoint that you have about what Bitcoin Cash really is as far as utility and payments. Why do you think the message is so lost on your point of view and what you think it is versus the way that it's being received?
I think the people that are just speculating on it and day trading with it probably don't see it, but the people that are actually trying to use Bitcoin in commerce, and it's worth pointing out that Bitcoin being used in commerce is what gave it value to begin with, so that the day traders could speculate on it. the people that are trying to use Bitcoin in commerce now know that it's completely broken and they're busy switching to things other than Bitcoin. And if it doesn't have that utility in commerce, it's not going to be able to be used as a store of value. And then it's just, people chasing a bubble at that point. And someday the musical chairs game is going to stop and the bubble will pop. But the coins that actually have utility that people are using in commerce will continue to have value and continue to be useful.
Yeah, but see, you know what? I don't know if I agree 100% with what you're saying in that if you look at gold, 500, 600, 700 years ago, people used it to buy things, and it was a pain in the butt because you carried around this gold and so on and so forth. And after a certain point, we stopped doing that. But gold's value has continued to go up over the long term, despite it not being used as a currency at all. And I think that's the argument for Bitcoin Core, is that it's much more like gold. The storehouse and value is the people who own it. So essentially, the more people who own it, the more shareholders, the more value it has. And I don't think a lot of people perceive it as a tool for transactions. And then there's your group of people that really want this to be a way to do transactions and really want to focus on that. But I think the market, or at least the public markets for Bitcoin, prefers to think of it more like gold than like a transaction-based credit card type system.
I think it's worth pointing out that gold previously was used as currency and widely used.
That's
and
what
because
I'm saying.
because it was used as a currency at that point, it went on to become a store of value. And even right now, while gold is being used as a store of value, it still has alternative uses such as jewelry and in electronics and that sort of thing. I don't think Bitcoin has been widely used enough as a currency to make the jump to being solely used as a store of value. And Bitcoin doesn't really have these industrial uses that gold does. So I'm very, very, very concerned about undermining Bitcoin's usefulness in commerce. I think that destroys its usefulness as a store of value as well.
I definitely agree with you on that point, that if Bitcoin has no utility at all other than to trade it, it's just a beanie baby. So yes, I agree that, the fact that I can transfer this to my friend in Australia, ideally for a penny, that has a huge value across the world right now. And if I'm in Venezuela or wherever, and I'm worried about my dollar getting devalued or whatever, I can move it into Bitcoin and know that I can spend it somewhere else. So you're absolutely right. If I can't spend it anywhere, it does lose a lot of value.
And it's worth noting that Bitcoin Cash about 48 hours ago actually had more trading volume around the world than Bitcoin Core did. That's a pretty darn amazing thing. That's never, ever, ever happened before in the entire history of cryptocurrencies. That was the first time ever that some coin other than the Bitcoin Core coin had a bigger trading volume. So that's a pretty exciting thing for Bitcoin Cash holders.
Let me ask something here, Ross, about the CME. The CME's done an interview, the CEO of it, talking about that we would see futures in the Chicago Mercantile as soon as the second week of December. Mm-hmm. He spoke a lot about pricing controls, trying to limit the volatility of Bitcoin to no more than 20% up or down. And even had some velocity, algos that would actually slow it down intrasessional if need be, up to even an hour intrasessional. What are your guys' thoughts, both of you, on the CME attempting to basically cap the natural volatility of Bitcoin marketplace? And what will that mean to Bitcoin Cash if Bitcoin Cash actually exceeds the trading volume of the futures contract that's coming out for Bitcoin? Could we expect a Chicago Mercantile contract for Bitcoin Cash?
So I don't know if you guys saw, there was a full-page letter taken out by the president of Interactive Brokers saying how dumb this idea was from the CME. The guy's been trading for 60 years. And his point is you can try to cap volatility, but it just opens limit up or down. And then the next day it opens limit up or down. And the next day it opens. So you can't really cap true pricing. And I think the problem when you add futures to this, when you add commodities trading that's basically not even really based off the real core value of the commodity, because remember, most commodities you can deliver. So like if I buy a lot of corn, I'm really supposed to like deliver it to somebody, even though I'm trading it as a future. With Bitcoin, there's no use for it other than to buy things. So, it's like
it's a cash settle contract too.
So I just think it would be bad for Bitcoin for this kind of trading to happen, because there's a lot of guys that might go out there and throw, let's say a $5 million future short positions that's leveraged, and that's going to move Bitcoin big time. So the last thing we need is institutional traders manipulating Bitcoin prices through the futures markets, and people are going to get wiped out. And I don't see that as a good thing.
So what do you think, though, as far as the CME coming in and, Ethereum, what Ross had mentioned, we are seeing regulators question ICOs and, untracked crowdfunding through crypto. Regulators are kind of pushing into this market from every direction that they can, whether it be talking, from both from China and the United States, talking about ICOs and where the money's coming from in those things. And Bitcoin, once it ends up in the CME, you can expect that the CFTC, the SEC, they're going to be all over the place in crypto. That's where it's going.
That's why you don't want it on there.
So that's why you don't want it on there. So is that, and I'd asked you before, is that one of the primary motivations, is that Bitcoin is basically falling into the trenches of conventional finance under the regulators' watchful eye, and Bitcoin Cash is like a fresh starting Bitcoin that is back where it used to be?
At the end of the day, regulators love to regulate, but the exciting part about cryptocurrencies and distributed technologies is that they're not regulatable. Maybe they can catch a few people here and there, but at the end of the day, people are free to do whatever they want with their cryptocurrencies, so long as they're using a cryptocurrency wallet and not a bank. So make sure you understand the difference. And I would encourage everybody listening and learning, use a Bitcoin wallet, use a cryptocurrency wallet, don't use a bank.
One of the interesting things that the CEO of the CME said too, he kind of sold a false narrative that it's impossible to short Bitcoin until this futures contract arrives. We all know that's been going on in Asia for quite some time on their exchanges. But as far as the American public goes, they've made it very difficult for the American trader to have access to shorting Bitcoin. Ultimately, the CME and the parties that are driving that institution to come into Bitcoin have a motivation, much like Core, to make money on this. And if they can push all of the exchanges that are overseas out of the marketplace, they get to force everyone to the CME to play that game. In time, though, let's say Bitcoin Cash completely outclasses Bitcoin, and it really happens, and all the volume switches there, all the miners switch there, and Bitcoin Core's chain goes dead. What's to stop the CME from issuing a contract and tying themselves into Bitcoin Cash's world? What will you do at that point if you have regulators walking into Bitcoin Cash?
I'm not going to store my Bitcoins with a Bitcoin bank or my Bitcoin Cash coins for that matter. And it's actually really trivial for any business that's already using Bitcoin. It's very, very easy for them to plug into Bitcoin Cash because it's basically almost the same thing. So that's why we're seeing it. And I would actually be, go ahead, Ross.
What he's saying is, what happens if the government comes after Bitcoin Cash now? Or you just fork again and you form Bitcoin Cash too?
No, you don't need to fork at all. Like, that's the entire point of cryptocurrencies, is that at the end of the day, by design, the actual software code itself is they are above the law of the regulator. If a bunch of politicians get together and write down words on a piece of paper saying that gravity, now by our legal decree, gravity must make things fall up instead of down, that doesn't change the way gravity works. And it's the same with Bitcoin. If a bunch of regulators get together and say Bitcoin has to do this or that, that doesn't change the way the Bitcoin protocol works one bit. So Bitcoin by design is above the law.
But if they make it difficult for citizens to enter the marketplace, doesn't that slow down the velocity of value that goes through the chain, which is a component of value?
Sure, it sure does. But that's what governments do all around the world. Whenever they get involved in the economy, they're slowing down the world's rate of economic growth. I look at the Great Firewall of China. How much is that hindering not just China's economic growth, but the entire world? Because China is kind of the world's factory, and they're producing all these goods. So all these people that are having to communicate and send files back and forth over the Great Firewall of China, that's wasting all their time and resources dealing with that. And that time and resource and money could be used to produce other things that make the world a richer place. So we're all poor off. We're all worse off anytime the government gets involved in the economy. And I don't think we should be surprised when government gets involved in Bitcoin and it hinders Bitcoin's rate of adoption.
One of the reasons they're getting involved is because of the ICO mania that's happened, because the government's job is to protect people. And with sort of an unregulated IPO process, you've created a situation where many people are going to lose a lot of money. And so the government gets involved because of things like the ICO, where they go, oh, well, now they raised $3 billion through these things, and we don't even know for what. And investors will lose money, certain investors amount. Some of it is fraud. And so the government feels like it's its obligation to go in there. And that's what I'm saying. It seems like Bitcoin is really into self-inflicted wounds, where if you don't want government regulation, then you don't create products where people can lose money.
Well, I think you're only looking at half the equation there. So yeah, people are going to lose money with these ICOs, but look at all the amazing technologies that are going to be created. Ethereum was basically an ICO. Ethereum wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that sort of model.
Well, what the government's saying is that it can still happen. We're just going to make sure that the crooks don't do it.
Well, how good of a job have they done of that in the past? Let's ask Bernie Madoff.
They do a really good job. In my business, if you got a DUI when you were 14 years old because you took your dad's car, it's a nightmare trying to get into my business. If in college you drank too much one time, and you know they are very, very, very hard to be in the investment business.
But I'm sure the con artists will pretend to be in the investment business and will pretend that they know what they're doing. They'll solicit money from people and get people
and
to
there's
invest
like
money.
12 regulators looking for them to bust them right now. So it's like, you know, if Bitcoin wants to protect itself from these people, they need a self-regulatory system maybe where there's some group that looks at the ICO like process and who's trying to raise money and make sure you don't have like, let's say, an ISIS ICO. I mean, you know, there's no greater way to, you know, get the government into, you know, regulation than terrorism or drug dealing, you know? Like Silk Road, I think in a lot of reasons is why the government's here in the first place.
So I guess it's important to look at the underlying philosophy as well of what's going on here. So with these regulators and these sorts of things, let's say, you know, all of us on this call want to get together and pool our money and start some sort of business and maybe get a dozen of our friends to chip in some money too. Yet some people that none of us have ever met and know nothing about our lives living in Washington, D.C. claim that they have the right to tell us what we can and can't do with our own money. To me, that's just absolutely absurd. And to me, one of the most exciting things about Bitcoin is that it allows people to do whatever they want with their own money.
That's not the part that's illegal. You absolutely can do that. The part that's the problem is that you're soliciting through the ICO investors that aren't suitable for the investment. So
who's to decide if the investor is suitable or not? Strangers that we've never met. They claim that if we don't obey them, they'll hurt us.
You know, for a reason. Like if you got some kid whose mom is
there's
on
rules
welfare,
for a reason. Is that what I heard? So
no, there's rules for a reason. Like if you got a kid whose mom is on welfare and he takes his mom's welfare check and buys an ICO thinking he's going to pay for his mom's health care, and then he loses the money and now they're out on the street. There's a human cost to theft and fraud. And it's a huge human cost, Roger, that you cannot minimize, okay?
Somehow I don't think it's nearly as big as the 100+ million people that were murdered by governments in the last century, the nuclear bombs that were dropped on civilians.
That's not what we're comparing to.
The 500,000 Iraqi children that were starved to death by the United States government. You can't have one without another. It's part of the same entity. So either you condone the coercion and violence in society by the state.
We're talking about mom and dad who hear about an ICO from their kid and they don't have enough money. We have people calling us that don't have an IRA account, that don't have money, and they want to know how to buy Bitcoin and all this stuff. And now you're telling me Bitcoin's a disaster, basically, and they should own Bitcoin Cash. They don't know anything. You have to understand, people don't know anything. And if they're investing in high-risk securities, they need to understand those risks. I don't care if they lose money. I care if they don't understand what they're doing. And that's what the government cares about.
So the question I have for you, are you willing to use guns and threaten people with violence to prevent them from participating in an ICO?
It's not about guns and violence. It's about...
Because that's the only option. You're not asking people not to participate in an ICO. You're telling them that they're not allowed to, and if they participate and if they offer it, they'll be sent to jail. So it's not about asking anybody.
They're not going to be
it's
sent
about
to
telling
jail.
them. It's a very,
That's
very
not
important
what it is
difference.
at all. What it is that the person
So what happens
soliciting the money...
what happens if I solicit the money and I don't have permission from those people? What would they do to me?
No, but if you raise money, okay, like I raised money like when I start my company, okay? So I call my mom and whatever. Let's say you're raising money for your company. People trust you, Roger, okay? They go, I gave Roger $5 million to start his Bitcoin company, okay? So every day you make a decision. I'm an honest guy or I'm not an honest guy. And whether you're an honest guy or not, whatever, you know, but there's a guy out there who's not honest at all, who's using your system to rip people off.
So there's already a website like that right now, despite the regulations, xrpgtrading.com. They copied my profile and all the employees at bitcoin.com on their website. They try and get people to deposit Ripple. I have nothing to do with that company. None of us have anything to do with it. And they're stealing, you know, people's savings. Where are the regulators for that? They're not doing anything.
Well,
bad people.
They probably don't know. Maybe when they watch this, they know now. They don't know. But there's people.
Track down that website. They're stealing from people
every day. There's people in my business doing the same thing, okay? And the government's not that good at it, but they try very hard to help people. And I can tell you when this thing goes down, it goes down when a lot of people lose their money, like Mt. Gox and a big ICO, like that one that just happened. And when people lose the money and it's stolen and then they complain, that's when the governments get involved.
So the question is, the government regulation a net benefit or a net detriment to the rate of economic growth around the world? And
I don't think that's the debate. That's not the debate. It's about protecting people. And does the government do a great job?
If it's hurting people more than it's helping people, then they should stop what they're doing.
Yeah, but that's
I think,
the world doesn't work in a zero-sum game. Like, it costs a lot of money to keep people in prison, but it's better than just letting them out, okay? Because it's probably a lot cheaper, and they probably don't do that much bad stuff anyways. But that's not the way it works. So we have to understand, although I agree with you, a lot of the things the government does is completely ridiculous, okay? But some of the things, maybe it's 20% of the things, are really important. And that's why it exists. It's gone awry, I'll give you that. But it exists to try to protect and help the people who agree to be a part of that system.
But you got to admit, it's hard to determine if the government regulations in this space is a net benefit, because you and I both remember the late 90s and the internet bubble, and the average person could open an account, start trading in that, for $500, and it was an opportunity that was kind of open to all. After the internet bubble happened, they managed to pin the bubble on the average day trader who had nil of capital involved in that marketplace, and then regulate them out with the pattern day trade law, which said you had to have $25,000 to trade 4 times in a week. So the average American has no savings. They kicked pretty much everybody out of that opportunity across the board, supposedly for our protection. And I can see what Roger's saying in that, what is the net benefit? Because today the stock market is at all-time highs. Some people consider it looking like a bubble, and there's almost nobody in the United States that knows they can day trade it because they've regulated everybody out of it. So did they benefit people by cutting off, the largest capital formation marketplace for American citizens to go? And will they do something similar here in crypto and take away a market that basically it has access for everybody until they make it difficult?
You brought up, I think, an excellent point there, Kaz. That's exactly one of the reasons why crypto is successful right now. When you look at the barriers to entry to just becoming a stock trader, if you're a 25-year-old kid with $5,000, that's why they're doing Coinbase and whatever and cryptos, and that's why there's so few IPOs anymore. And that's why ICOs exist, because they have regulated my business into oblivion. What do you think I deal with half my day? A bunch of stupid, dumb, antiquated laws and rules that very ignorant people made up a long time ago that tons of people are trying to enforce that have no idea how to enforce. And so,
so stop condoning those people. And these are, for the most part, people you've never met.
That the root of what they're trying to do is good, even though they haven't applied it that good. And what I'm saying is that with Bitcoin being such a young thing, that, ICOs that lose people a lot of money put the whole concept at risk. You guys are better off regulating yourselves to make sure this doesn't happen, so the government doesn't come and kill it. And that's what I was saying before about like Mt. Gox and Silk Road and all these things that were happening 2 years ago that were like making Bitcoin, look bad and forcing the government to take action. So if you leave everything to go on its own, what you end up getting is a lot of blow-ups and a lot of stupid people losing money, and then they go complain to the government, and then the government comes. And that's what you don't want. So there's a lot of value to a self-regulatory framework where people within Bitcoin say, hey, these actors are bad, and I'm not sure if I want to just, have them raise 100 million in an ICO.
But given that you said they're poor at doing their jobs, do we want them in a marketplace they know even less about than the stock market trying to enforce rules to protect us?
That's why I say you should self-regulate. There should be people within Bitcoin who want to make sure the integrity of it survives and not let the criminals get into it. And this is one of the things that we argued about a lot last time, is the criminality of a lot of people, because in general, Bitcoin people are very trusting and millennials are very trusting. You guys are very trusting. And there's a lot of criminals, just kind of like what you're saying about what they're doing to Bitcoin Core. There's a lot of criminals that are here to just make money, and they don't give a crap about whether Bitcoin lives or dies or whatever. And this is the next way for them to scam people. And if you don't have any way to protect against it, it's like, letting pedophiles hang out in the schoolyard.
Jesus. Well, self-regulation is kind of how we got Bitcoin Core, Bitcoin Unlimited, Bitcoin Cash. And like you said, without any real central kind of governing body, you're going to just get this fork in the market. The market's going to continue to spread apart and kind of like be like controlled chaos to a degree.
Right. And that's going to be the end of it all, because then there'll be so many different currencies. It'll be great for the exchanges as everybody trades them, but the values won't increase dramatically because it'll be diffused among many more currencies and ICOs.
You got it.
So, Roger, do you think that there is a chance that Bitcoin Cash would draw a lot of the capital back out of many other altcoins into the Bitcoin Cash market cap if it did see the utility that you're talking about? Or is it possible that a lot of these other projects out there are funding technologies that go in a different direction on blockchain?
So I think Bitcoin Cash at the moment has the second biggest network effect, second only to Bitcoin. And if we see businesses like blockchain.info, the world's #1 Bitcoin wallet, who's already announced publicly that they will have full support for Bitcoin Cash by the end of this year. And if we see other businesses like Coinbase and Zappo and BitPay and of course Bitcoin.com integrating full support for Bitcoin Cash, I think we can see a whole bunch of the capital sucked back into Bitcoin Cash, because it'll be the exact same formula that led to Bitcoin's original success, which was cheap or basically free transactions that went through almost instantly. And were super reliable, and that was the formula for success. And Bitcoin Cash is on that same formula again. And I can tell you have a price chart of the Bitcoin Cash behind you there as well. So, perfect.
You know, it's interesting if you look at the fractal of the Bitcoin from the lows of 2015 and Bitcoin Cash from its lows today. It's almost exactly the same chart in the way it took off. It looks like a fractal of Bitcoin, although in a faster time scale. Definitely got our eyes on this one, Roger. I really appreciate you guys joining us today to discuss this, because it's definitely an interesting concept and definitely an interesting time in the market with CME and blockchain payment solutions coming out of JP Morgan. There is definitely a changing of the guard. So 2 years later from Cash Cycle 1, we are here at 8,000 Bitcoin Core, about 1,180 on Bitcoin Cash. Anybody want to make a prediction on where we'll be in another 2 years on both of those chains?
I think Bitcoin Cash will be the dominant chain in 2 years, well before 2 years.
Ross, your thoughts?
I'm thoroughly confused now about its future, and I think one would want to probably diversify into different coins than Bitcoin based off the information, because it isn't so certain. And I think kind of now that everybody's really into Bitcoin, maybe that's why it's over. Maybe the future is Bitcoin Cash, because when everybody starts talking about something and JP Morgan and all these people are looking at blockchain and this and that, maybe that means it has peaked. Maybe this is as far as Bitcoin Core goes. So maybe the future is the way Roger looks at it, because I do agree with the concept. If I can't really use it to buy anything because it's too costly or transfer, it loses all utility to me, because there wasn't any utility really in the first place. So the whole thing that made it cool was I could make free transactions, I thought. And when they're charging 3% on transactions still, so I would argue in 2 years, Bitcoin Core could be gone and it would be all Bitcoin Cash, or Bitcoin might have peaked here and there'll be lots of other coins that are very successful. Or all the other coins fail and Bitcoin survives and these guys profit a ton and they bury Roger somewhere in the bush,
Somebody has to die, right?
That's right. Well, it turned out it was Russ Ulbricht is the guy who died for Bitcoin. I mean, this guy's putting away for life, for selling drugs.
Well, to be clear, he set up a platform that allowed other people to sell drugs, and hopefully he'll be out someday, because that was actually the guy. Yeah, that's right. And he was actually the guy that gave Bitcoin its initial value, because it would allow people to use it in commerce. And that's what it was, because of the Silk Road that I heard about Bitcoin for the first time and took such a big interest in Bitcoin.
Well, from humble beginnings, I guess you can say.
But I do have to say that I think that, this show is really valuable. I appreciate your time, Roger, too, because, I educated myself a lot from our original show, and, I take these things and I run with them, and I have become important in the legitimate, financial circles. I think a positive force ultimately for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, especially under the Trump administration. I've become actually a bigger fan of the whole concept, because I don't think I've ever hated the government as much as I do today. So I'm much more on your side today, Roger, than I was 2 years ago under Obama.
Welcome.
So I might be with you. I don't know whether you can get these curtains. They're amazing. I don't know what country you're hiding in, but I might end up with you, you know? But I do think this is, and I was thinking about the other day that the crypto infrastructure, not the coins, but this alternative financial system, there's something here that's really big and it's really awesome. And it's because my industry is so behind and so clueless. And so I do see a lot of value in what we're doing here for people and for the crypto world so that we can hopefully make a world that makes sense outside the traditional financial system.
Yep. I appreciate you guys both coming back to join us for Cash Cycle 3. Roger, as always, man, appreciate your time. Ross, always fun time. Thanks everybody for watching Cash Cycle 3, The Real Bitcoin.